Hello, everybody. My name is Average Election Enjoyer. Today is May 30th of 2026, and in this video, I just want to go over every 2026 Senate race that I think is going to be at least somewhat interesting um, coming up here. We are in May. Of course, these elections are going to be in November, so we still got a good 5 months. So these are by no means predictions or anything of that sort of matter, but we're just going to be looking at a lot of these what I would deem as the most interesting um of these races here. It's all safe states, of course, for either side, and then also Minnesota for the Democrats, Florida for the Republicans. Even though these aren't going to be likely margins, I don't think they are particularly interesting races. I think either side has or will respectively win handily in each of these states, even though technically they're going to be in the likely and not in the safe categories for either side. So first, I'm gonna start on the right and move left across this map. So first, we have Maine. Of course, this is a huge election. It's the only state that Republicans have a senator there that the Democrats have won in the past election in 2024. So this is going to be the biggest and probably most likely Democratic, not most likely, but this would be on paper the most likely pickup for the Democrats here with Graham Plattner running. He has a lot of controversy, of course, but Susan Collins is also very unpopular because she's been perceived as a moderate, but her hand has been forced and she's had to make several votes that are um, not nearly as moderate as her image may imply, and that is going to hurt in a state like Maine. Um, if we go, we can see some of the polling here in Maine. Of course, for the Democratic primary, Plattner is dominating. He is, and with Mills dropping out, he is going to be the Democratic nominee. And same thing, Susan Collins completely cleared out her field. But if you look at these polls here, you see the most recent polls, actually every single poll, Graham Plattner is in fact winning by a substantial margin. He's up an average of 8 points on Susan Collins, and he's cracked 50% in several of these more recent polls there, which is huge, while Collins is struggling to even get to 45. That's how I like to view polls. Of course, they aren't indicative. They're just a snapshot, and they are usually not exactly close to what the margin is looking like. They are very much so wrong. But if you see a candidate consistently in the high 40s and low 50s, that is always a good sign for the campaign. So we can see that Plattner very much so does have a lead here, and he is going to be probably the favorite in this election. Even though Susan Collins, obviously, she's a habitual overperformer. She has won, for the past 20 years. This is like going to be her fifth or sixth term. So she is a habitual overperformer. And a winner, which is always important in winning these close elections. Being a proven winner always helps, and her more moderate image, even though it's sort of come under fire recently, um, does still exist. There is still going to be crossover appeal um, for more moderate Democrats or especially independents to vote for her. But it looks like Plattner does in fact have a lead in this election, both both knowing that the environment for the Democrats is going to be very good, knowing that it is a state that voted for Kamala Harris by I think it's 8 points or so it wasn't super close of an election. Anyways, it's a New England state, of course. So all the check marks are looking like it is a race to lose for Graham Plattner there in Maine. So I'm gonna say, of course, I'm gonna judge all these races, putting them in lean on either side, who I think has a current edge. Um, and speaking of states that Democrats have an edge in, we have New Hampshire. New Hampshire is the closest New England State by far. They went by 2.8 points, I think, in 2016. Very close elections recently. However, it votes consistently more blue, of course. and on a both a state level and also in federal elections, but just not presidential elections. Like all the New England states, they are more blue down ballot than they are at the top of the ticket. And this is just another state where Republicans, they can get their hopes up. This is a potential flip, but it is very much so not likely, of course, with this current environment. If we just want to look at the polls here for New Hampshire, of course, you have Sununu. This is a political family in New Hampshire, a political Republican family who have been elected officials for the state before. Of course, if I'm correct, this is the less popular brother, though, which is certainly not going to help win this election. And then you have Pappas here, who is, of course, also dominating the field. He is the incumbent. And you see that the polls are not even particularly close. It's even further of a margin than Maine. Of course, the actual election is probably not going to be a 10-point plus win for Pappas here, but he's definitely the clear favorite going in these elections. Again, 52%, 48, 47. He's consistently in the high 40s, low 50s, and let's see Brown here. Of course, these are there we go. This is what I was looking for. Of course, see, it's only a 4-point margin for Sununu, who is the far more popular candidate here. This is what it is likely going to be looking at here. But again, Pappas is still high 40s, low 50s in several of these polls, and he is definitely polling ahead of Sununu here, especially in this national environment. It's just very unlikely for Republicans to be able to flip a state, a New England state, especially here, even though they do have a Republican governor who is, you know, an actual Republican. It's not like in Vermont with Phil Scott, who's just fiscally conservative. Kelly Ayotte is most definitely conservative, but a little more moderate than your average Republican, and a lot of these Democratic voters are probably going to be coming home for Sununu. So this is definitely a lean, again, lean victory for the Democrats. Next, we'll go to North Carolina, a state that should be very close, but unfortunately, Republicans are suffering because Democrats not only got their best candidate, but Republicans have an only okay candidate in North Carolina here. And that's going to cause some struggles. Democrats, of course, managed to recruit Roy Cooper here in this election, and that is most definitely going to be helping them as he is an electoral juggernaut. Similar to Susan Collins in Maine, despite being in a red state, he consistently won governor's elections, and he was a electoral juggernaut, and now he is running for Senate. If we go to some of the polls here, we see this is the general election, Cooper versus Whatley. Cooper has a substantial lead in the polls, and again, cracking 50% in all these, not every one of these polls, but high 40s, low 50s is where you want to be if you want to win an election, and Whatley is nowhere near that. 42, 39, 41. These are some poor performances in the polls for Whatley. Of course, this election is going to be closer. But Cooper has just done better and better. Initially, this was expected to only be a 1 or 2 point race. It's now gone up to a 3 or 4 point race for Cooper is what it's looking like. It's looking like it's going to be a solid Democratic victory here. Not solid, but in all likelihood, he's going to win it. It's going to be a close margin, but it is a decisive is probably a better word for it there, and that is what is looking like gonna happen in North Carolina. And similar thing in Georgia here. We have Collins, who is leading in all these polls. He's likely going to be your nominee, but Dooley, football coach, is coming back. And then, of course, Jon Ossoff is an open field. And he is, in these more recent polls, 51-48. He's looking like he is going to be able to win once again here in this election. Of course, it's likely going to go to a runoff. This is going to be a closer race than North Carolina. And of course, in all these races, I chose them because I think that the other party has a chance given that something happens. I think that in the other races that I'm not talking about, if there is going to be a large scandal, it's probably not going to sway the election. That is sort of the criteria I see, is that if the perfect storm does in fact happen for the other party, then they have a chance at flipping the election. That is the criteria I chose with these. And Georgia, of course, is going to be in a similar boat, to where Republicans do have a chance, but I think they are likely not going to win in this election. In Ohio, of course, Republicans, this is going to be the first race that I think Republicans have an advantage in. Sherrod Brown is, of course, going to be a strong candidate. It's just unlikely that he's going to be able to make such a political comeback. He lost in 2024, of course, and he lost by a decent margin in Ohio, even though he did overperform Kamala Harris. It's just unlikely that he's going to be able to bring it back, and we see the polls reflect this. With Houston, the incumbent, getting above 50% in several of these more recent polls. Of course, Sherrod Brown, to his credit, 45-47%. That is closer than what you saw in the other polls, where it was like 50-42, 50-43. He is getting into that middle to upper 40%. If the environment keeps on shifting, then he might have more of a chance, but I am going to say that this is going to be a lean state for the Republicans. They are likely going to be the winners in this election. And now we're in Michigan, which is the Republicans' greatest chance for a flip in this election cycle here. They won this race in 2024, and Democrats have been really struggling with their candidates, El-Sayed, McMorrow, Stevens. This is a very contested primary. It's a very ugly primary. And the Republicans have a basically cleared field, and that is helping them a lot in this election. And you can see they each have a early lead. That Rogers actually has an early polling lead. However, because he is languishing at 42-43%, and because Michigan tends to be a more Democratic leaning state, especially for Senate and gubernatorial elections, I have to say that I can imagine that a lot of these voters, while they are voting for other candidates right now, despite this early lead that Rogers has in the polls, I think that a lot of these sort of undecideds are going to come home for the Democratic Party here. In some of these elections, as you can see, some of these others are a little closer, but I can imagine that a lot of these voters are in fact going to be coming home for the Democratic Party come November, and I think that Democrats are in fact going to have an advantage in this election here. Next, we're going to move on to Iowa, where I think it is a pretty clear advantage for the Republicans in this election. Despite Rob Sand being a pretty good candidate for the gubernatorial election, he does in fact have a shot of winning, though of course you can't say he is the favorite. This is going to be probably the least interesting of all the races I've covered so far. I think that Republicans are going to, in fact, have a clear advantage in this election. You can see early leads for the Democrats, but there's only been one poll. Echelon Insights has been the only poll, so there's not really much to discern from here, from these pollings, but this is a Republican state, and it is likely going to remain that way. Next, we have Nebraska. Nebraska is interesting because they have a independent running, Dan Osborne. It's going to be a independent versus a Republican. And of course, there's not much polling in this state. Dan Osborne did, in fact, overperform by quite a bit. He only lost by like 6 points in 2024. In Nebraska, which is very impressive considering 2024 was almost a perfect storm for the Republican Party. They won the popular vote, which they haven't done in a decent bit. They won not in a landslide, but they won a very definitive, very defining election there in 2024. and that is going to be helping. And of course, Ricketts is an incumbent here, and that is also going to help. So I can imagine that this state is going to remain in the Republican column here. Now, Texas is a state that is getting very interesting because Democrats have a pretty good candidate in James Tallarico, and Republicans have a very bad candidate in Ken Paxton. Ken Paxton, of course, is embroiled in many scandals that I don't even need the name. If you know, you know. He's very controversial as a politician, um, and that is going to be to his detriment in Texas here. However, because Texas is just it's a very conservative state. It is still likely that um, Paxton is still going to be able to edge out the victory, but I think this is going to be one of the sleeper races. I think this is going to be a fairly close election. I think it could be decided by less than an O'Rourke margin here in Texas. It could be a nail biter. Of course, I'm going to have to put it in the lean column. However, if there's a state that I would put as a toss up, well, of course that would go for Alaska too, which would be our next. But if there's a state I would put as Alaska, it would definitely or a state I put as a toss up, it would definitely be Texas here because just Ken Paxton is a terrible candidate. That is going to definitely hurt, and I don't think their messaging is particularly good here either. It's mostly just culture war slop. Which is not going to work as well in a midterm year as it is where with more informed voters versus a general election. It's probably not going to succeed as much there. I'm actually just going to leave it in toss up there, and I'm going to do the same in Alaska because Alaska is a traditionally conservative state, though it is a little more libertarian, which means they're a little more liberal on social issues, especially here in Texas. So when you see a Democrat like Mary Botola, who has won some special election or won a special election and a general election to be a House of Representative member for Alaska. You have to imagine that Democrats actually have a fairly good shot in this election, even though, of course, as I was saying previously, um, it is a traditional Republican conservative state, I would say. Peltola is in fact leading in some of these polls. However, there's not too many polls here, and Sullivan is an incumbent, and that is definitely going to be helping there. Of course, it is ranked choice voting, so it'll just depend on if she can sort of win the second vote from some of these more conservative leaning people who might not be a fan of what the Republican Party is currently doing in Washington. I think this is going to be another very close election. If you were to put a gun to my head and make me say what I think is going to happen, uh, I think that maybe this is just gonna remain a toss up. If you put a gun to my head, then I might be down on the floor. I might not be able to give a prediction in this election here, of course. But I think that um, I think that Peltola has a fairly good shot of winning this election, um, even though I think it's very 50-50. And I'll just because I think it's going to be closer than in Texas. I think that Ken Paxton has more of a chance of winning in Texas than Dan Sullivan does in Alaska here. So this is going to be the only uh, pure toss up I'm going to leave here. This is the best chance for Democrats to flip a seat that they weren't expected to flip. So I'd like to thank you guys for watching this video, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.